The USS Lexington, CV-2, nicknamed Lady Lex, was one of the United States Navy's earliest and most iconic aircraft carriers, playing a foundational role in the development of naval aviation and carrier-based warfare. Originally laid down in 1921 as a Lexington-class battlecruiser under the designation CC-1, her construction was halted due to the restrictions of the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, which aimed to limit naval armaments among the major world powers. However, rather than scrapping the vessel entirely, the U.S. Navy converted her into an aircraft carrier, and she was reclassified as CV-2. Commissioned on December 14, 1927, she became one of the first fleet carriers of the U.S. Navy, alongside her sister ship, the USS Saratoga, CV-3. At over 880 feet in length and displacing more than 35,000 tons fully loaded, the Lexington was a massive and formidable warship for her time. Powered by turboelectric propulsion systems, she was capable of reaching speeds over 33 knots, making her one of the fastest ships in the fleet. During the interwar period, Lexington served primarily in fleet exercises, training missions, and war games known as fleet problems, which were instrumental in developing the doctrine and tactics of carrier warfare. These exercises helped establish the importance of aircraft carriers in projecting naval power and allowed the U.S. Navy to experiment with launching large-scale air raids from the sea. One notable incident in 1930 involved the Lexington providing emergency power to the city of Tacoma, Washington, during a major drought that affected local hydroelectric sources, an event that showcased the versatility and technical capabilities of the ship. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Lexington was at sea, ferrying aircraft to Midway Island, and thus escaped the destruction that crippled much of the Pacific Fleet. In the following months, she conducted offensive operations in the Pacific, including a planned raid on Rabaul and successful airstrikes against Japanese positions in the Gilbert and Marshall Islands. In May 1942, the Lexington took part in the pivotal Battle of the Coral Sea, the first naval battle in history where opposing fleets engaged one another entirely with aircraft and never came within direct visual range. Alongside the USS Yorktown, CV-5, Lexington launched airstrikes that sank the Japanese light carrier Shoho and severely damaged the fleet carrier Shokaku. However, on May 8, Lexington was struck by 2 torpedoes and several bombs from Japanese aircraft. Although her crew managed to contain the initial damage, leaking aviation fuel triggered massive secondary explosions and fires that could not be controlled. After hours of fighting to save the ship, Captain Frederick C. Sherman ordered the crew to abandon ship. Over 2,700 crew members were rescued, but 216 sailors lost their lives in the battle. The ship was scuttled later that evening by torpedoes from the destroyer USS Phelps to prevent her capture. The loss of the Lexington was deeply felt, but the battle itself was a strategic victory for the Allies, as it marked the first major check on Japanese expansion and prevented the invasion of Port Moresby in New Guinea. The performance of her air group proved the decisive role of carrier-based aviation, and her sacrifice demonstrated the vulnerability and value of fleet carriers in modern naval strategy. In recognition of her legacy, the name Lexington was reassigned to a new Essex-class carrier, CV-16, which would serve with distinction throughout the rest of the war and into the Cold War. Decades later, the wreck of the original Lexington was discovered in 2018 by the expedition team of Paul Allen, resting at a depth of about 3,000 meters in the Coral Sea, remarkably well preserved. The USS Lexington, CV-2, remains a symbol of innovation, sacrifice, and the dawn of carrier warfare, marking a turning point in naval history and helping to establish the aircraft carrier as the dominant capital ship of the 20th century.